you didn't get to choose your family. You didn't get to choose what you were exposed to, but you have to challenge that as an adult. That's your responsibility now.
Hello, Daniel. Welcome to the podcast, man. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Brandon, for having me on the show.
Hey, I'm excited to have you, man. You're a beast, man. It's 7 a.m. where you are right now. So to record a podcast at 7 a.m., that's a cool thing.
Yeah, we gotta do what we gotta do sometimes, you know.
Yeah,
but hey,
sure.
I'm never gonna miss an opportunity, you know.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, you gotta get up early to do it. You have a podcast as well called the Stoic Sage Podcast. I've actually been on your podcast. I don't know, was it 2 months ago now?
Yeah. You were on my podcast a couple months ago.
Yeah, a couple months ago. So you run the podcast, and you also have an Instagram page that sort of goes along with that, where you share. Obviously, it's based around Stoicism, so you share a lot of ancient quotes, and you also on the podcast itself, you talk about a lot of ideas, sort of in a modern way. And I think your emphasis, which I like, is on trying to tell people how to think as opposed to what to think. And so that's a great slogan. So just to start off, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about the podcast, what you're trying to achieve with that, and we'll go into it from there.
Yeah. So I discuss on a weekly basis, every Tuesday and Thursday, modern challenges, utilizing 2,000 years of knowledge to bring about, like you said, how to think rather than what to think. I think it's relatively safe to say that social media in the modern world has caused people to kind of be have a short attention span, and which is inevitably causing people to just accept headlines and or take this too long didn't read approach to life,
Right.
And to attaining wisdom. So on that podcast, I really want to make sure that people are testing their mental impressions. So I try to introduce a way of thinking, and on the podcast, just challenging your thoughts the entire time, questioning yourself, questioning those around you, questioning what you're accepting, really, because that's all how we attain wisdom. That's how we have more virtuous lives. So that's the main focus of Stoic Sage Podcast.
Yeah, well, it's great, and it's like you said, like we really got to learn how to think. It's. And do you ever worry about, because I worry about this sometimes, I see a lot of people, at least, and I do it too. I like, you like quotes on Instagram that you see from Marcus Aurelius or really anything, even just a motivate. It doesn't even have to be a quote from an ancient Stoic. It's just like a quote, some idea, and people like it, and then they scroll on and their day just goes on as normal. They don't implement anything. So it's kind of like this. I don't know what it is. They're getting a little dopamine effect. It's like, oh, that's cool. I double tap that on Instagram, get the like, and then you go on with your day, but you never actually implement it. Do you ever worry that maybe people are just liking stuff and not actually implementing it into their lives?
Oh, of course. I mean, there's a segment called Collection of Powerful Quotes that I have on a monthly basis, where I'll go and look at mainly on my page, looking at all the quotes and whatnot. But the purpose of that section of the podcast, or that series, is really to make sure that you're looking back on that information, right? Because that's the purpose of me posting those quotes, so you have something to think about, but also challenge it. Like how am I applying this to my life, to the modern world? Because all these Stoics, they didn't just say shit; they just say shit.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry for
no curse, man. Curse all you want.
But yeah, like I think that I do have a concern. People are just scrolling; they're not really caring, having a care in the world. But on that podcast series, I really want people to look at it and apply it to yourself. So I will discuss it. Oh, this is how it was impactful to me in this month. Let's review it. What did I think about it? How should you think about it? How should we apply it to the modern world? Yeah, I think a lot of the knowledge is universal. So we have to use it, right? To apply it to us.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, that, and it is a great little series you have there, sort of going over the quotes and how to apply it. And the other thing I worry about in conjunction with that is that ancient Stoics, people, everyone that's not alive anymore, they were people. And we talked about this a little bit on your podcast, so I don't want to go into it in too much depth, but sometimes I feel like people just like things from people that have said it from 100 years ago or thousands of years ago, and they don't actually think about it. And of course, these were people too. Sometimes they don't. They might be wrong on a couple of things. So just because Marcus Aurelius said it doesn't necessarily mean that maybe it's applicable in your life. And so you have to allow for the fact, first of all, that maybe he had something wrong, because I mean, meditation was, after all, really a journal.
Mhm.
So there's that, but there's also like the translation of it as well. And so I think, just to hit home, the point I'm trying to make is that, like, you got to look at the quotes, but it's like you said, you have to critically think about it. You have to analyze it for good or for worse. Maybe it's applicable in a good way, but maybe you also go, okay, wait a minute, like, I get what he's trying to say, but I think he's missing something a little bit here.
Yeah, we have to build off of it, right? We can't just take
Mhm.
all of their information at face value all the time. I think I'm also pretty active on Reddit, and I'll post my quotes on there. And sometimes some of these quotes, some people bring up some really good topics where they'll even say like, oh, that's a very misogynistic point of view. And I think to myself, well, yeah, you're completely right. They lived in a different world. We live in a different world. So if that approach to you is not something you agree with anymore, or we as a society don't agree with anymore, then update it. That's what we should be doing as Stoics. In Stoicism, you're also taught, don't like idolize people so much, right? But we're
Right.
kind of on the social media world. That's kind of what we're doing, where we're only seeing Marcus Aurelius and Seneca and just being really excited about it. Which, by all means, find inspiration, but how are you building off of it? How
Yeah.
are you growing that wisdom? Because we've changed. We've attained a lot more knowledge as far as understanding ourselves. The field of psychology and has expanded so much. So now we're going into the neuroscience of your brain. It's we understand so much about one another now. Apply what we've gained so far to what these guys built the foundation on, right? So I
Right.
completely agree with you.
Yeah. It's like, it's extremes. There's two extremes. It's like, either the person is a god in your head, and so we should like worship Marcus Aurelius or Seneca, and then, or it's like George Washington did some bad things back in the day, so let's rip down his statues. It's like there's no in between. It's like we want to
Exactly.
consider people either completely good or completely evil. And so if you think someone's completely good, like for example, we'll go just Marcus Aurelius because we're talking about him so much. If you think he's completely good, and then you learn a historical fact about him that you don't like, a flaw, because of course he was
Mhm.
flawed, he was a human being. It's like the scale tipped a little bit, and then it's like, oh, no, 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 he's completely evil, and it's like he's in that
Yeah.
category now. It's a hard thing to see online, but anyways, I guess the point is we got to work on sort of understanding that they were people too. Historical people were just people. They weren't gods. They weren't completely evil, just like no one today is completely good or evil. I
Yeah.
want to transition here into, you did an episode recently which I really liked, which is reconciling the issues of your past. And so this was a great episode where you talked about, just to give a quick summary, that we don't really choose what we're born into. We don't really choose the life we come into. Obviously our wealth to a huge degree, our skin color, our height, all these things. There's a lot that we don't choose when we come into it, and as well as growing up when we're children, there's a lot of things that happen to us that we don't get to choose as well, and we're all traumatized in some way from our
Yeah.
childhood, some more than others. But that just because you didn't have to choose, just because you didn't choose the life you were born into, doesn't mean that you don't have the responsibility to actually fix the problems that you have from that. And just to close, what I was going to say, there's one of the things you said, the way you worded it was something like, well, if you don't like me that way, well, that's it. And man,
Mhm.
I hate it when I hear people say that, because it's like,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. Listen, you're not perfect. Like, you need to accept that. And if you accept that, it's the only way you're going to actually be able to get better. And we want to
Mhm.
we want to think that we're all just perfect the way we are, because we don't want to feel bad about our incompetence or our failures or flaws. but that's not the way to go, because we're never actually going to improve in life.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God. That honestly kind of gives me like a little brain aneurysm right there. Every time I hear that from somebody, I'm like, really, dude, come on. All right, like you're like gonna accept, like the thing is I'm, you know, I'm trying to help you by even bringing this up, right? If I'm telling you you need to improve on something, or hey, this response you're having is X, Y, or Z, and their response is, well, if you don't like me the way I am, then then leave, or like they'll get very defensive, and it's like, no, that's not the point. I'm offering you an opportunity for you to improve, or I'm also giving you an opportunity to be introspective of yourself. You should be doing that on a daily basis anyway. Why do I do the things that I do? That's a really big question. Why do I respond in certain ways? I think that a big example would be in your relationships with your loved ones, right? Because how you learn how to love, a lot of it comes from your family, right? And you didn't get to choose your family. You didn't get to choose what you were exposed to, but you have to challenge that as an adult. That's your responsibility now. The trauma responses that you have with them that you're bringing into the relationship, that's your responsibility to deal with now. No matter how much you want to blame somebody, well, I'm this way because of this person, I'm this way because of how I grew up, of where I grew up. It doesn't matter anymore. You're an adult. You got to be an adult now. Like reconcile with those issues, especially if it's like a trauma response. I mean, a good example is, if a couple if one couple was grown up in a narcissistic kind of family, and the other couple happens to be in a very relaxed family. One common thing that I see online as a really good example would be the husband comes home and asks the wife, hey, how was your day? Right. And because of the trauma responses that she's gained as throughout childhood, her response would be, oh, are you trying to tell me that I'm not doing anything? Do I need to give you a list and stuff like that? It's like, no, that's not the point. The point, I'm trying to have an open relationship with you, have an open discussion with you,
right?
But those responses you've gained from your family, those are the things that you have to reconcile. Why did I respond that way?
Yeah.
Well, dig deep. It was my family. Well, what happened in your family that caused you to do that? Like, that's how you begin to reconcile those issues, by understanding your responses and then critically thinking about them and moving forward.
Right. And particularly with partners, I think one of the things Jordan Peterson said that really struck this home with me is that you want a partner that's just as imperfect as you are, that's just as screwed up and messed up as you are. Because like that example you just gave, and absolutely no judgment on either person, we're all sort of living different lives, we're traumatized in different ways, but the one person was like, okay, more or less he or she had had a more healthy outlook on a relationship. It's like, okay, you come home, I want to ask you about your day, I want to know, I want to communicate. So he's doing everything right by the book, right?
Yeah.
But the other partner, because of the trauma, came in, and she's seeing that because she is more traumatized than he is in that particular regard, and so she's seeing that in a toxic way. And so you don't want someone that's like way more toxic than you, because if you're the guy or girl that's like, hey honey, how's your day, and then they like, what are you asking me for, and they freak out, because of their trauma, you don't want to be that guy either, because you're like, okay, I'm just trying to be nice here and you're jumping down my throat. But you also don't want to be the traumatized person either, because it's like, okay, everything you see is going to be toxic around you. So what you want is someone that's just as traumatized as you are, more or less, so that you can actually grow together and learn from each other.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Jordan Peterson, I love what he says about relationships being agreeableness, right? Somebody in the relationship has to be a little bit more agreeable than the other. If you guys are too agreeable, not many decisions can be made, right? And if you're too, and that's obviously very broad example, but and if you're too disagreeable, you're going to be bickering all the time. So you need to have, like you say, a good amount of toxicity, I suppose, in the relationship, but you also got to have some agreeableness and disagreeableness as far as compatibility, because that's how you're going to resolve issues together, right? And
Exactly.
that's how the relationship grows.
Yeah,
So
and he said too, along the same lines. I can't remember the exact ratio. I think it was 1 to 11. It's like in a proper relationship, you want one negative response to every 11 positive responses. I don't know if it's
yes.
11. I have to double check that number, but the philosophical idea there is that nothing is perfect, which is true in life, and it doesn't just apply to relationships. It's like you don't want everything to be perfect as much as you think you do. You don't really fundamentally want utopia. What you want is a world that's going
You
to
want a challenge.
you
Yeah.
want a bit of a challenge, and you want, it's like, again, with the Tao's, with chaos and order, you want order so that you actually have bones to hold yourself up, but you want a bit of chaos that's going to actually challenge you in life. And so it's the same way with relationships. You don't want it too good. You want to fight every now and then. Even if you don't think you want to fight, you want a little fight every
Mhm.
now and then, because it's, first of all, it's kind of like I've been in a couple long-term relationships too, and you get to the point eventually where you know the person really well, and you know their quirks, and you know more or less who they are, but every now and then you might do something, and then they snap, or they do something that you don't expect, and that's like, it hurts in the moment, but it keeps the interest in the relationship alive, because it's like, oh, wait a minute, I wasn't expecting that. And if you can keep that going for years and years and years in a relationship, like, I think those are the ones that end up being the most successful.
Yeah, I mean, you got to challenge each other. That's how your brain sees growth too, right? Like you want to find results or a goal. You want something to strive for. So I think that's really important, especially in a relationship. I mean, I've been um, in a 10-year long relationship with my
Wow.
yeah.
Good
So
for you, man.
I thank you. Yeah, I've been engaged. This is going to be our third year, but we've been together for 7 years. So, but yeah, it's, you got to challenge each other, man. That's, I mean, no one else is going to tell you how to grow besides yourself and the ones that love you. And the one's going to love you the most is your significant other. A lot of times when you're being challenged to do better, it shouldn't be like, you shouldn't let it hit your ego first, you
Right.
know? At least try not to let it hit your ego. It's gonna sting sometimes, especially if it's true and whatnot, or if you recognize, oh, I do need to improve in this portion of the relationship or with myself. But we also need that, because then you get bored,
Hmm.
like, how am I improving? How is my partner improving me? Or how am I improving my partner? Because you're going to be different people too. 5 years down the road, you're going to pick up a bad habit here or a better habit there. But who's going to moderate that? It's
Right.
it's going to be your friends, it's going to be yourself, and it's going to be your loved ones. But then the question is, who's going to actually tell you?
Right.
And the people that are going to tell you, those are the ones you're going to accept the most. You should accept the most, right? But that's where the challenge is. I mean, yeah, relationships are a challenge, and it's definitely a daily struggle, but it's a good struggle, like that you should kind of crave. You should crave a challenge, right?
Yeah, well, you don't want someone that's just gonna tell you everything you want to hear. And again, like, in the moment, that's what you want. This is a really important distinction. In the moment, when you're like, hey babe, I want to go off and go away with my friends for a week and go binge drinking and forget my work and forget this, and I'm gonna leave tomorrow. It's like, in the moment you want her to go, yeah, go, but like, really, in the long term, you want her to be like, okay, well, hold on a minute. That's not practical. We haven't planned for that. We don't have the money
Yeah,
aside. Like, you want someone that's actually going to tell you the truth about it. And
exactly.
it's like, I've always thought that, like, you have masculine and feminine traits, and I don't mean male and female. I mean sort of the symbolic representation of masculine and feminine. Masculine traits
Yeah,
and feminine traits. You need like a whole picture. You need both in a relationship, right? So like, agreeableness is more of a feminine thing, and hardworking is more of a masculine quality. And you need a full picture to be successful in life. That's the way I've always thought about it. Like, you can't have someone that's just like a really hard worker that has no compassion, because they're not going to have any friends, not going to have any network, no one's going to like them, and it's going to be a very
exactly.
lonely life, right? So you need both.
Mhm.
And if you have a relationship, it's so much easier to get all of those pieces, because you contribute some. If you're a guy, you contribute some masculine qualities, you contribute some feminine qualities. If you're a female, you contribute some as well. And the point is that you're trying to get a full picture. You're trying to get the package that's going to actually allow you to go through life successfully, and not only go through life and life's challenges, but probably the more important thing is so that you can actually raise kids properly.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And that's why it takes two parents, of masculine energy and feminine energy, however the relationship is, whether it be male or female, doesn't matter. There
Right.
is a balance though, right? That you need to have, because we as humans, we have that balance. Guys have more masculine balance than feminine, and then it's the other way for females. I mean, that's
Generally
it's
speaking.
absolutely necessary. Yeah, generally speaking, but it's absolutely necessary because that's who we are fundamentally as humans,
Right.
right? And for men, I mean, that's for my relationship, for example. I mean, I'm obviously the masculine, and my wife and my future wife is the is the feminine. There are obvious traits, right? There is the male being more bigger picture. He thinks very straight line, like here's my goal and here's how we're going to get it. Whereas the feminine energy will bring in more creativity to it, will bring in more nurturing into it, right? Something that I wouldn't necessarily think of, but the fact that she brings it up betters my life, right? Or same thing with hers, where if she's only thinking creatively, then I kind of bring more structure, right? And then it's
Right.
okay. So you can have that, but how are we going to get there? And now let's create a path. Let's find something to attain, or to a goal to get to. And that's kind of how it's balanced, as far as like a quick example. But there is a balance there that we need in relationships. That's also how you get better too. And like, don't be too masculine, right? I think that sometimes too much masculinity can be a little bit bad, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
I think Plato or Socrates had mentioned, right? Like the ideal human is someone who's not just an athlete. Let's call that the overly masculine, because he's a savage. He's just very one-sided, doesn't want to think any other way but his own. But that's damaging in the long run with your relationships, with your family. You need to be wise, as to say, accept other ways of thinking. So that would be the feminine side of things. And then also be masculine to, challenge things. And that's where the masculine traits come in. You challenge ideas, but you need a balance of all of it. And that's
Right.
the ideal human, right? So it's really interesting, honestly, with relationships, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, it is. It's fascinating. And something you mentioned there earlier in that talk that you just said was it doesn't matter if it's a same-sex couple. If it's a guy and a guy that are married, it doesn't matter. You still need a balance of masculine and feminine, because
Yeah.
feminine doesn't directly correlate with female, and masculine doesn't directly correlate with male. Now, generally speaking, and I think the split from personality studies, it's like 60%. So like women, generally speaking, on average, women are 60%, feminine, more feminine than men. But that's not that big of a split either. If you think about it, like 60,
Yeah.
40, 60, 40 is not that big of a split. So,
Definitely not the biggest one.
no. So like on average, it's a little different, but even if you are in a gay couple or lesbian couple, you still need the balance of male and female. And to get back what you mentioned there, which was really cool, was that you need both masculine and feminine. If you are masculine and feminine, it's the perfect human being. And that's something else that's really worth clarifying, because a masculine trait does not omit a feminine trait. They're not like, it's not like two ends of the scale. Like you can be masculine and feminine. It's not like you are one, and by definition, because you are one, you can't be the other. It's like, no, you can be both. And a great example of this is in the hunter tribes day, in the hunter gatherer days. So the best hunter wasn't the one that was the best hunter. It was the best hunter that was the best hunter, but also would share it. Because if you didn't share it, you were just an asshole, really, right? Like you hunt, you get your thing, and then you go off and you eat it all by yourself. Like that's not the best person. The best person is one who has the strength to go off and conquer, really, in that particular case, kill the animal that's providing food, but that also has the compassion and the community and the sort of the feminine quality to say, hey, listen, have some of this meat. Let's all share this together.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how you grow, right? That's how our hunter gatherers grew their villages and their communities. And that's, in modern day, that's also how we grow our communities with our friends and our family. That's how we strengthen those bonds too, where you take, and it's like today it's called a like a push and pull kind of thing, right? So it's absolutely necessary. And I mean, even and like we mentioned, even in those other couples where it's a gay or lesbian, on average, you will kind of notice if you're, I'm a people watcher. So, or, that's my hobby. I like to people watch when I'm outside, but I'll notice too, that like, there's always someone in the relationship that's a little bit more masculine than the other. That's just the way it is. It's
Right.
very rarely will I see a couple where it's the same. Very, very
Right.
rarely. It's always someone's a little more masculine than the other, even in gay or lesbian relationships, because we recognize that that's what we need too. As a masculine, I want more feminine, right? That's to
Yeah.
balance me out. By mentally, that's what I need, right?
Right.
So and so we're going to relationships. That's kind of what we end up seeking. So that's how it balance us all out.
Yeah. And it's practical because if you're more masculine, you're going to be interested in different jobs than if you're more feminine. Right. And so in a relationship, if each of you are 50% masculine, 50% feminine, you're both contributing half. Basically, everything you do in life is going to be divided 50-50. Okay, you clean,
Mhm.
you clean the bathroom, I'll clean the kitchen. I'll bring home this amount of money, you bring home that amount of money. And I'm not like, that can work. That can definitely work.
Yeah,
If you get that balance perfect, that can absolutely work. But I think a lot of times in relationships, what you see is some people like to do some things that other people don't. So it's like, okay, for example, I like cooking. I love cooking. I'll cook, I'll spend an hour cooking and I'll get the plates out and dish food for everyone, but I hate doing dishes. So I would much rather cook for an hour and you do the dishes for a half hour than you'd cook for an hour and me do the dishes for a half hour. Even though it's more time for me, it's like, no, I don't like that job. Now, some people love doing the dishes. Some people hate cooking. So it's like, you have to find like the personality difference, broadly speaking, masculine and feminine, they point you towards different jobs that you like. And I don't just mean career jobs. I mean, everything that we have to do in life to actually survive, such
exactly.
as cooking
Mhm.
and cleaning. And so, in a relationship, again, you need both in order to properly balance and make sure that you can actually do all the jobs. And hopefully you're going to want to do some jobs and the other person's going to want to do the other job. And there's going to be some that you both don't want to do. I hate taking out the trash, but I do it anyway. So it's like, some things you got to negotiate there as well. But the more you can have a relationship where there's certain roles that you like and want to do that the other person doesn't like, and they'll do the other things that you don't want to do. That's like the ideal relationship right there.
Yeah, yeah. It's always there are some things you have to compromise, right? And that's part of being compassionate. That's part of taking charge. Balancing the feminine and masculine energies. But you have to compromise. Don't be such a hardhead that you refuse to change. You're not going to get very far, buddy. I'm sorry. you got
Right.
you got to change yourself a little bit. You got to be willing to say yes to other things. And they're also, you also understand that there's some things that are non-negotiables, right? And that's totally fine that you go into a relationship that way. Have some non-negotiables, but also be willing to compromise for other things, because you're dealing with an entirely different person than you are, with a
Right.
totally different thought process, totally different way of thinking. And amongst all of the differences that you have in terms of thought and the way you grew up, you still can potentially fit perfectly, right? All those imperfections fit perfectly. So it's relationships are pretty complicated. So.
Oh, very well. I mean, there's a reason why we're still talking about it after all this time. I mean, it's so complicated. And um yeah, I mean, obviously they've done personality studies, which we've talked about here, but it's hard to really get a good blueprint for a good relationship because people are so different and everyone has their little nuances. And I think that's why so many people say that you need to learn how to communicate properly. And I had an interesting thought, actually. You tell me what you think about this. I feel like when you're in a couple with someone, or when you're in a couple, um, I see sometimes people that have been together for a long time, and even me when I had when I in my longer term relationships, uh, you begin to really understand each other a bit more, and that's good in some ways. But the other side is that now you know what pisses them off too. So what's interesting is that, like, I've noticed, like, if you watch couples, because I'm a bit of a people watcher, probably not as much as you, but I watch people a little bit. If you watch couples sometimes and they're working out together, or they're doing something together, they'll and they're fighting. There's like this ball of energy around them where they're like, they're
Yeah.
fighting, right? And then they'll just do these little stupid things that, like, if someone did it to me, I wouldn't care. If someone did it to you, you probably wouldn't care. Like, I don't know, maybe they leave the collar on the floor, like on one of the weights, like something small like that in the gym. And for me, it'd be like, okay, I'll just put the collar back on. But because that person knows the other person so well, it's like, this is going to piss them off, and I'm going to do this right here. And so you become so much more attuned to those little things. And then you know that they're doing it to piss you off, because you know them as well. And then so
Yeah.
you sort of got this, like, you're contending with them, you're sort of like fighting a little bit, but in like this I don't know, it's not even subconscious. It's like, because I suppose you're doing it, but it's not, from an outsider's perspective, the act itself might not be big, but just by looking, that, like, there's something going on here. There's an argument, there's something that's not being addressed.
Yeah.
I don't know, what's your thoughts on that?
Immediately what came to thought was there's a little bit of an ego battle. Like
Oh yeah.
they're kind of poking at each other's egos, and they're like, well, I'm right. However the argument is going, right? Like, well, I'm right. Well, no, I'm right. And now I'm, a little angry. So I'm going to push your buttons a little bit because I'm angry, because you made me angry. It's definitely a little bit of an ego battle. In those moments, I mean, you got to be compassionate with one another. You got to be open. Like, hey, I know we're going through a tough time right now, or like, I know we're going through something, but let me tell you how I'm feeling real quick. You tell me how you're feeling. Be open, be honest. I always try to tell people, and I apply to myself too, be as logical as you can,
Mm,
because having too much of an emotional response can be, more damaging, right? And a relationship, so it's an emotional bond that you're having to begin with, right? And then at one
right.
point you realize, logically, I want to stay with this person. That's where, in my opinion, that's where you decide, I want to marry this person, because it hits you logically that it makes sense to be with this person, not just an emotional attachment, right? So, but same thing within the relationship. Not only do you have those emotional ties, and you bicker one another and you have these ego battles, but then you also got to sit back and realize, okay, I logically chose you for a reason. Now we have to logically get through these funks, get through
Hmm.
these ruts that we're going through. Why are you pissing me off right now? Like,
Yeah.
like very like be open with one another, because that's who you're going to be open with forever, right? But yeah, I think it's an ego battle. You got to be open with each other, man. You gotta say what's what sometimes, and accept it as a logical test. I think that's the big
Yeah.
thing, because if they tell you what you're doing wrong, take it as a logical thing instead of so emotional. Don't take it to the ego firsthand. Like, if you're being challenged for, you're making me feel this way because you're doing this, it shouldn't be a reflection of who I am as a person, but more about my actions, my logical decisions, making that action to piss you off.
Right.
Then you're able to kind of remove yourself, tell yourself, okay, logically, this is why I did this, and I understand emotionally how it's impacting you. I'm going to move forward logically this way. That's kind of how
Yeah.
I would say you should be tackling these issues, right?
I love
So,
that, man. I love that transition that you said there between the emotion and the logic, because you're
yeah,
absolutely right. That's what separates a short-term relationship from a long-term relationship, because
oh,
you
100%.
have, obviously, like, if you're out at a bar, wherever you meet someone, obviously there's like probably an initial attraction, you're physically attracted to each other, and then so the emotional side is like way up, and there's probably very little actual logic in it. I mean, there's probably a little bit, but it's probably like 95% like this person's really attractive and like we're having like a decent discussion here and there's some emotions going on. And then as time goes on, the emotions go down and then the logic to the relationship goes up. And then there's a point where they meet where it's like, okay, that's a point you talked about where it's like, do I actually want to stay with this person logically? Does this make sense? Because
Yeah.
and the goal is to maintain at least some of that the emotional thing as well. But like you
Mhm.
said, it has to be built on logic, and it's so hard to do when you've been with someone so long, because you see, like I said, those little things they do that piss you off, and you know they're doing it. You see that as like, they're there's an emotional response to it, but there's also a little logical part of it as well, because it's like, okay, they know that they're doing this. And so you have to contend with that. And I don't know, I feel like maybe you'd think it would get easier with time to communicate with each other. But um, I think maybe it does get easier in some ways, but in another way, it becomes a little bit less easy to communicate. Not maybe less easy, but it's just as difficult. It's like, it's always hard. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter how long you've known someone or how long you've been together. It's always hard to swallow your ego, or to say, like, hey, like, this isn't about you. I had a shitty day at work. I'm sorry. Like,
Yeah.
that's always hard to say. Like,
Oh yeah.
I don't care how much practice you have. I don't know. You have more experience with me. You've been with your girl there for 10 years. But I don't know. Has that been your experience?
Oh, 100%. Oh yeah. I mean, if I'm challenged or, questioned about why are you reacting this way, initially, I have an emotional response like, oh my God, especially early on in the relationship, it was very, very much, and well before, adopting stoicism as a way of thinking, I would always just have an emotional response because it was, that's natural, that's normal. Oh, sorry if you're hearing that in the background,
Emotional
but
response over there.
yeah, right. But yeah, I always had like an emotional response initially, but as I've gotten older, you have this logical portion that you need to address with yourself, because that comes from you. No matter how much you're being told something, at the end of the day, any changes, any adjustments that are being suggested by your partner, you gotta accept it. You can't just keep pushing it to the back burner. And you have to see that as an opportunity to grow with one another, not as, oh well, why is she always on my back, or
Mhm.
vice versa. Why is he always on my back? It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if those things are brought up in a very valid way, which, by the way, emotional responses, in my opinion, like, they're very much valid because that's your response. But how you tackle the issue is where the logical portion comes in. Okay, I understand you had that response, but as far as addressing it, I don't think that having too much of an emotional response is going to resolve this issue, because X, Y, or Z. Like, because I didn't try to hurt you emotionally. I'm just having a shitty day, right? So
Mhm.
having too much of an emotional response isn't really going to benefit um, moving forward with it, right? But yeah, it was definitely a challenge to uh, going on this long with my relationship.
Of course.
um, Adding more logic definitely adjusted things as far as handling things. Honestly, you got to step away sometimes. Step away, take a deep breath, think about yourself. Don't think about the response. Think about what they're saying, internalize that, challenge that with what you thought in that moment, and then proceed forward and
Right.
tell yourself, even talk to yourself, tell yourself like, oh, I need to calm down real quick. I think I'm acting a little emotionally right now. What's the best way to move forward? And generally speaking, the best way to move forward is going to be the logical approach, the logical approach, right?
Right.
Obviously, add a little bit of emotion in there. It has to say, I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. I'm sorry I reacted this way. I'm sorry I did this. That's all emotion. But logically, test it against what you've done. Logically, I'm sorry I did that. That was a total asshole move or something, right?
Mhm.
But you got to have that conversation with yourself. You got to test yourself. That you got to allow those challenges to hit you, and especially if they're coming from your partner.
Now, how much do you think people actually need to compromise or should compromise. Obviously, there's a little bit, and this is kind of where I disagree with Jordan Peterson in a way. Jordan Peterson thinks that it doesn't really matter who you choose. I'm sort of summarizing what he's said, but generally speaking, what he says is that it doesn't really matter who you choose, because there's going to be things you're going to disagree with anyway, so you have to work it out. It's not so much who you choose versus how you're willing to actually grow the relationship. And I disagree with him a little bit. I think you need, I mean, now to be fair to him, he did say that you need a personality that's more or less compatible, right? So he's not, he's not saying that completely, but I think, like, in terms of compromising for someone, it's like you can imagine that the more you compromise, the more likely it is that you're going to have an issue in the future, right? Because the more you compromise right now, again, you say the emotion goes down and the logic goes up. At some point, the logic's going to say, okay, I'm compromising way too much for this person, because now you don't have the emotional response either. At the same time, you can't be too strict, because if you're not going to compromise at all, you're going to die alone. Like that's the truth. If you don't compromise at all, you're going to die alone. It's a very hard thing to say and to hear, but I really think it's true. You need to compromise a little bit, but what's that balance there? It's really hard. And what makes it difficult, what you said there too, is that because the emotional goes down with time and the logic goes up, it's really hard to know until you've actually spent some time with people. Like it's hard to really know. So what do you think about that? I know it's a really tricky question. I'm trying to figure out my own head here. So I'd like your input on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it comes down to compromise, right? And how much should you compromise? I think that there are some things that you should not compromise with. Those are things that you should know right off the bat, though, when you enter a relationship, right? For example, very simple ones would be, I like to choose a healthy lifestyle, right? And so you're not going to compromise with someone who wants to go out nearly every day drinking. That's something you shouldn't compromise on. Mainly, there's many reasons, obviously, for health, but also for yourself. Like, you have a level of integrity that you want to hold onto still, and that is something you should not compromise with. Some other things would be, spending time with other guys, right? Like guys' night or girls' night. I think those are extremely important. And in my opinion, you need those, because especially in quarantine, you've spent so much time with your significant other.
Right.
You need other perspectives. You need you need to recharge that energy, right? That for me, for example, I need to recharge it with another masculine energy. She needs to recharge it with another feminine energy. Otherwise, we're just going to mixture too much, and then it's going to lead to bickering, and then emotional responses are going to continue to decline. That's how you keep things spicy as well. I mean, like, it's
Right.
the heart grows fonder when you separate a little bit, right? So that's another thing that you shouldn't compromise on. But I think the most important thing is definitely your principles. Your values and your principles are the number one thing that you should not compromise on. And those things, you should find somebody that you share with. It's okay if there's like some minor differences, right? But the overall value and the principle, those you guys should 100% agree on every single time. Unfortunately, the biggest example that I could think of is political. I mean, you kind of need somebody that is going to agree with your principles and your values, because that's how you're going to raise your children. That's who you're going to bring into the next generation. Like, you can disagree on candidates, right? You can disagree on, one political year you were Republican and your wife was Democrat. That's fine. But the values, what are your values there? Do you both value the same thing as far as, let's say, American values, where freedom, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, very, very overview. Do you agree with that? Because if you're going into a relationship where you 100% believe in that, and then your significant other is like, no, I think communism should be the reigning way of thinking, and you don't budge on that at all, and you don't challenge each other, how do you think you're going to raise your children with that?
Yeah.
Like there are definitely some things that you should not compromise. I think values and principles are some of the really big ones, because that's how you're going to raise your children, you know,
Yeah.
and I think if you can't agree on how you raise your children, that's a recipe for disaster.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no,
Because
that's
then that's got
great.
to go back to the whole reconciling your issues, full
Yeah.
circle. I mean, then you're giving your kids more things to reconcile with.
Well, exactly. And to get, I guess, yeah, it might not be a bad time to circle back to reconciling your issues. I mean, that's a great point too, is like the, and I mean, that's really the reason why you get into a relationship. Like, yeah, it's to share your life. Now it's more, and I mean now in terms of 21st century, it's more to share your life with, but that's pretty recent. Like historically, it's been to produce children. Like that's been the reason for a relationship. Now people are living longer, people have more time, you know, kids leave the nest, I don't know, 17, 18 years old, and you still have like 40 years to live. So what are you going to do, right?
Yeah.
And so now it's, but really that is the purpose, is to raise kids. And so the less you disagree with in terms of values, I agree with you. I think values are one of those things that you should absolutely not compromise on. And also I think personality differences, you can compromise, but you got to be careful, because
Yeah.
like, for example, I'm introverted, so it's hard for me to get with someone that's extremely extroverted, because um where she's going to want to go out and be with friends all the time, and I'm not going to want to go as much. Now I'm slightly extroverted. Everyone's slightly extroverted, actually. Personality wise, the scale is like, the scale is extroversion, meaning every single human being is somewhat extroverted. There's very few people in the world that wants to live in a cabin by themselves, but we're talking relatively here.
Yeah.
And I'm relatively introverted, and so it's hard for me to get with someone that's really extroverted, because we're going to clash constantly about how much to go out, how much to have friends over, and that stuff. But I do want someone that's a little introverted, because I want to be challenged in that way. And so,
Yeah.
it's now, arguably speaking, those issues will be worked out initially, right? Because like you'll know right away. But I think, to get back to the emotional thing, when you first get in a relationship, like you said, there's that emotional thing that's like the emotions take over, and emotions can justify illogic.
Yeah.
And that's the danger. It's like, okay, she's really extroverted, but she's hot. So, and that's how people actually think. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
there's this little bad thing, but it's not that big of a deal. And then as time goes on, the emotional side goes down and the logic goes up. And then you reach that point where it's like, you know what? This doesn't make any logical sense now that I don't have that emotional response attached to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And like there are differences in how we approach relationships too. I mean, a more masculine energy kind of man is going to mainly look for beauty, because for guys, a beautiful woman is also status. That's
Right.
just the way it is, right? Like we want to show off our women, but notice how we don't really talk about how much you're making them. We don't really care, because from a masculine perspective, from a male's perspective, we're going to want to provide anyway. So on the flip side, when a woman looks out for a man, like, yeah, she's going to look for someone who's attractive too, no doubt in that. However, how his attractiveness scores in her eyes is going to dramatically increase the moment you say, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I do this, I own my own
Right.
company. Why? Because you can provide resources, because the feminine instincts kick in. Like, my children, my offspring will be taken care of.
Right.
And that's a very, caveman kind of example, but it's very, very real, because we're seeing it still.
Yeah, it's well, that's the thing. And I want to make it, first of all, I want to make it clear that we're talking generalities here. There's women that are completely on the other end of the spectrum, but we're talking about generalities here. But people might, the initial response of some people might be, okay, that's a little sexist, but it's like, we evolved from animals, like mammals, particularly mammals, because mammals are maternal. And so that has been built into us to some degree. Again, it's not 50-50, it's not 80-20, it's probably somewhere like 60-40 or 70-30. You know what I mean? Like it's around there. So it's a slight difference, but it's not like we're not completely different. So basically that's been built into us for so long that now sort of the initial response of a woman is like, okay, I am going to be pregnant for 9 months, which means if anyone's been pregnant, I haven't been pregnant, but I've seen pregnant women, you cannot do a lot of things. Like that's the facts. Like especially in the last trimester, like it's hard for you. You can't work for one. It's very hard for you to get up and actually move around and do things. In the caveman days, you definitely can't protect yourself. And so that's sort of like having a male that has the resources and can also protect you, like that is what's valuable, because you cannot protect yourself,
Yeah.
because you are very vulnerable when you're pregnant and immediately after you're pregnant, because the baby is very well, it's a baby, right? So you
Yeah.
so you have to take care of it. And so so that's sort of built into us in some degree. Now we have wonderful things like maternity leave. So now women don't necessarily need that anymore, but we're still governed by that old part of our brain, that mammalian part of our brain, that sort of
Mhm.
giving us that initial response. And it can't be understated that uh, the difference is slight, and we're talking generalities here, but that difference has been scientifically observed.
Oh, 100%. I mean, like you said, it changes. It changes a lot of times in modern history. I mean, the main thing that I would say is we've just tagged on many other things, but at the core of it, those are things that we value as individual male and female, and again generalities, but those are things that we value individually, right? In the modern day, we just tagged on other things. Oh, I don't care, if he has that many resources, if he's a very sweet man, that's fine. But at the end of the day, you still want to be taken care of. Maybe not to the degree that of a millionaire, that's totally fine, but you still are looking for someone who can take care of you. And in
Mm-hmm.
this case, you said a sweet man, you want someone more emotional, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or um, yeah, there's like many examples. I mean, even just tastes in cuisine, or lifestyle. All of those things are just little tags that we just attach to the core of it,
Right.
right? That's all modern society has kind of done, and that has led to many differences in what else we want. Some people just don't want resources. That's totally fine. That's up to you. But there's still something there though, and I think we all
Right.
kind of know it. We all want to be taken care of. Guys want to be taken care of emotionally because we're more mentally resilient, as far as having to be resilient, and then women want to be protected physically and with resources. I mean, that's obviously who wouldn't, right? but,
Yeah. Well,
but
I think at the very least, we want someone that's at the top of our preferred hierarchy. Now,
yeah.
wonderful thing about humans is that you can define your hierarchy however you want. Like you can define it as beautiful as beauty. You can say, okay, I want the most beautiful woman, and that's the only thing that matters. You can define it as I want someone that's the most driven at work. You know what I mean? So whatever hierarchy you choose, which is really what you want in a partner, however you want it. So for example, you might want a sweet man that's also can bring home some of the bacon. So that's your hierarchy. Now, some people aren't going to meet that demand. Some people are not. Some people are going to be really hardworking. They might be a CEO and they make so much money, but they're not. They're just very cold. Now they're at the bottom of your hierarchy. Now, the sweet man
Yeah.
that has a decent paying job that, he might not be making millions, but he's making a decent salary and can support you. That might be at the top of your hierarchy. And so you can go for that person. Some people want just the money. So it's like, okay, for that particular person, maybe the CEO is at the top of the hierarchy. So like, and that's a wonderful thing about humanity, like, because it means that most people actually have a chance at a relationship. Because
Oh yeah.
can you imagine if it wasn't like that? Like, can you imagine, for example, if the only thing that every guy in the world cared about was beauty? It's like most people probably wouldn't have a relationship. Like what interests me is I see particularly scientists who have who's obviously that they have a partner, and they're both scientists, and for me, I might not find the woman attractive at all, like, maybe, okay, she's a little pretty, but like I wouldn't find her super attractive. But for the scientist, it's like, no, I don't want someone that's just attractive. I want someone that's, attractive to me, but the more important thing is they have this scientific mind. They have these attributes. And it's not necessarily the case either with guys that you just want beauty. And it's very rarely only one trait that you want. It's normally like, I want someone that's, that's smart, but that's also maybe a little compassionate. So you want several things, and that's basically what your desired hierarchy is. But that's honestly, it's such a wonderful thing, because most people now, like imagine deers, like one guy gets all the girls.
Yeah.
Like that's how it works, man. Can you imagine if that was true, like on like for humans? Like that would be just horrible. So it's and that's probably built into our cortex and our consciousness, but that means that more people can actually have functional relationships and good ones.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing about that is, fundamentally, when it comes to who we seek in a relationship, I mean, I also want to preface this with, I feel like there's like a little bit of a double standard, right? Where women, or not women, but people in general kind of think that men just want one thing and one thing only, and it's just beauty and sex. And while humans in general want that, it's not just a male centric thing. We can all admit that most men don't really talk about their emotions or talk about entirely what they're thinking on a day-to-day basis, but it's a lot more complex, people. It really is. But that being said, when it comes to, finding relationships and whatnot, it's pretty crazy to learn that most men aren't even able to get women, but more women can get men. And the reason behind that is because there's the whole social hierarchy, right? That what we were just discussing. You have to be at the top as well in order to get the top, or to get as many, the numbers, right? Because there was a study that I read where the question was asked, how many the question was asked, do you think more men sleep with women, or do you think more women sleep with men? As far as promiscuity goes. And surprisingly, more women are actually having sex with many men than men are having sex with women.
Right.
Now, why is that the case though? And the case is because because a very small percentage of men have that the things that are desirable that women want. So it's the rich guys, it's the guys that, the guys in VIP, right? In the at the clubs. Why do most women spend all their time in those sections? Because those are the only men that provide that. And then all these other guys, it's just a sausage fest in the on the dance floor, because they can't get the women. So at the end of the day, it's even in social interactions, it's shown what we want, right? But it's a little bit of a double standard that I wanted to just point out, because it's not all black and white. It's not all men want this and a bunch of men are just promiscuous. That's actually not the case. That's not how it works, because there's only a select few of men who actually can offer that. Whereas women are born with value. When you're born, you are born with value as a woman, but a man has to develop that value, and how he develops that value is through providing resources, making money, building his mind, building his body. He has to build that. He isn't born with it. But a woman, she's born with value. You already see that she's beautiful, and she has also the say in who she wants to be with in the modern day too. So she also holds the power a lot of times.
Well, I think
the social component is crazy.
I think the fundamental value that you spoke of there, part of it's beauty, but I think the bigger fundamental part is the fact that women carry the baby. Because that and what's interesting, an interesting thought to consider, is that when a man and a woman have sex, the risk for the female is so much more than the risk for the male. That makes the female more valuable, and that's why the female selects. This isn't this isn't sexist in any way. Like, this is biology. Like, I am a male, I cannot carry a baby. Like
Yeah.
that's it. I need someone to carry a baby for me. And so that makes them more valuable. And, you know, it's no small thing. I mean, there's a reason why young teenage girls mature so much faster than young men. It's because the consequences of being irresponsible are so much higher. If you get pregnant
Mhm.
when you're 13, well, guess what? You're going to spend 9 months pregnant, and then you're going to have to, raise the baby all throughout high school. Like, it's a huge risk. Now, the guy, if he's worth his salt, he should probably stick around and provide. But guess what? He doesn't always have to, and he should. I'm not saying he shouldn't. He should. But let's be honest here. Historically, it's men have run away quite considerably. So
Oh yeah,
the value is in the next generation. It's in providing children, right? And
exactly.
that's, like, again, we don't consciously think of that, but it's that mammalian part of our brain that's fundamentally driving our actions and what we're looking for.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's a little nerve-wracking, honestly, just because I feel like sometimes in society where like a lot of people are just trying to separate from that entirely as though it doesn't exist. Like you
Mm-hmm.
could separate it, you don't have to think about it, right? It's a very deep topic to even get into, but it is something you have to at least acknowledge. And I feel like a lot of people nowadays are like refusing to acknowledge it as reality. And like, I know that, yeah, if you want to be an alien, that's totally fine. If, where you don't have to do certain things, you're not bound by social constructs. But like a lot of it is biological constructs that are involved in our social constructs. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily that men have only created this way of thinking or women have only created this way of thinking. It's how you evolved as a human,
Yeah.
and it's now in our social. Now we're trying to balance it with our social portion of it, and now we're on social media where we're more connected today than at any point. So now we have to navigate that. How are we going to navigate it? How
Yeah.
are we moving forward? And that's how more wisdom is going to be attained, more knowledge is going to be gained, and understanding how we're connecting with one another.
Well, I read this really cool thing, and I'm reading a book on neuroscience at the moment. And what he said, it was just a brief line. He didn't go into it in too much detail, but what he said is that as human beings, we want to believe that we come from a higher being, right?
Yeah.
Like God, right? Essentially, we want to believe that we came from the top down. We came from something that was pure and good to what we are now, flawed. I mean, that's the story of Adam and Eve, right? They were like, basically, they were gods, and then they bit the apple. They had the knowledge of good and evil, and now they're human beings. Now they're flawed. They came from God, and now they're human beings. The reality is that it's the other way. We came from like single-celled organisms that evolved throughout all of time to the point where we became reptiles, and we share a lot of our brain is or about a third of our brain is reptilian, which is like very basic instincts. And then we were mammals. We became mammals, which is more like maternal, more family values, compassion, that sort of thing. And then now we have this neocortex, which is pretty cool. That makes us pretty interesting, having a neocortex. But the point is that we want to believe, because I suppose it's ego, that we come from a higher being, from God. But the reality
Yeah.
is that it was the other way. We came from nothing. We came from dirt. And so we're still driven by a lot of those evolutionary principles that made us who we are. And we can't avoid it. We can't avoid it. And again, I think it's an ego thing, because it would be nice to say, oh yes, we are God. We were perfect, and then we became flawed. But no, we started flawed, and then hopefully we're moving in the right direction, but we still have those ancient parts of our brains that we can't cut it out. We can't get rid of it.
No, we definitely can't cut it out. I mean, at least not for a number of generations, and selective breeding for that to take place.
Yeah. Hashtag Elon Musk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see how his Neuralink changes us, right?
Yeah, that'll be interesting, man. I'm kind of worried about that. I don't know if you're a Star Wars fan, but with the clones, have you
Yeah.
Star Wars? Yeah, they put
A little bit. Yeah, yeah.
okay. Well, the clones when they turned on the Jedi, basically it was a chip that the Emperor had put in their brains.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it was like so when he said execute Order 66 when they were going to kill all the Jedi, it wasn't just like, okay, I guess we're gonna do this order now. It was like it was a chip that was in their brain that when he said execute 66, the brain was like Jedi are evil, and then they just start killing Jedi like mad. So
Wow.
I hope I don't hear Elon Musk say execute Order 66 after
Oh my
everyone gets
God.
those
I'm
Neuralink
gonna be
brain
honest,
chips.
man. Knowing Elon Musk, he might do that as a joke,
He
just to
would.
fuck with people.
He would,
He's
yeah.
that kind of guy.
He'd be like the piper, you know, he'd be playing the flute,
Yeah.
and then everyone would just be dancing to this Neuralink thing. Anyway, I think we're gonna wrap it up there, man. Listen, thanks a lot for coming on. It was that was an interesting conversation about relationships. I think we hit some great points there. Um, I'm gonna give you a chance here. Do you want to say anything? Where can people find you? What's next for you?
Yeah, yeah. So again, thank you, Brandon, for having me on the show. I mean, I had a great conversation, and yeah, if you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm really active there on the Stoic Stage, and I also have a podcast, Stoic Stage Podcast. I'm on all the platforms. You can check me out on Tuesdays and Thursdays, discussing modern conversations. And yeah, overall, I really bring in about how to think instead of what to think. So let's get to it, right?
Yeah, check them out. So I'll tag you on all the posts so people can find you. But listen, thanks again, man. All the best.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers. Bye.